Hello, hello. Welcome to another All Hands on Deck. I'm Catherine McBean. This isn't the big one that I'm planning on doing. I'm just doing this one as a quick update because obviously there's so much happening now. It's all moving so quickly. And I'm seeing a bit of panic and a little bit of stress on social media. You'll have to excuse the way I'm talking. You might be able to see a big swelling. I have a dodgy wisdom tooth. It's been playing up for a couple of months now. I've got a massive infection in it. I went to the dentist yesterday. They can't take the tooth out. They can't do anything while it's so swollen. So I've got to get rid of the infection. But it means I'm talking with a bit of an impediment at the moment, which is fine. Some of the best people I know have got speech impediments. So you just have to bear with me if I feel like I seem like I'm talking a little bit funny. So, wow, what a few weeks. What a few weeks. And I have a sneaky suspicion that things will keep moving with some speed now. And I think if we make it to the 2024 US elections, in terms of everything carrying on as it should, I think that's unlikely. And I'll explain why I think that's unlikely. So we've had a few big events happen over the last few weeks. The first really being Trump's attempted assassination. And what I'm trying to get across here is for people to understand that this is about exposure. What we're seeing roll out now is about exposure. I spoke on the last video and I discussed it being a controlled demolition. And this is what I'm on about, is the bad guys and the bad structures, the infrastructure of the deep state establishment, flipping whatever name you want to call them, is now starting to crumble. And this is happening through exposure. Anyone who tells you stop trying to wake the normies up, I'd suggest you don't listen to them, because there are still people waking up now and there will be more coming. And the only way you can do this is by showing them the reality. And you have to be able to prove that. And you have to be able to do it in a way that the media can't twist it and play with it in order to suit their narrative. It's got to be something that they cannot do that with. There's just no other option. They've got to speak truthfully. They'll still put a spin on it, don't get me wrong, but it's got to be a way with which the viewers, the people out there, will see it for reality, see it for what it is. And that's what we're starting to see happen now. So as a result of the attempted assassination of Trump, look at what we found out in what, week and a half, 2 weeks, wherever we are with it. Since then, we have heard from the Secret Service in Congress yesterday in the House, and Kim Cheadle was just not forthcoming with answers. She wasn't giving them anything. It was 9 days, sorry, so 10 days after. So it was 9 days after the event took place, and she couldn't answer barely any of the questions that were, or refused to answer barely any of the questions put in front of her. She kept deferring over to the FBI. Now, what does this show? Well, this shows exactly what I was saying last time, in the fact that there is this group government organization who refuse to be held to account by the representatives, the elected representatives of the people of the US. And yesterday showed that the FBI are very much involved in that conversation. There was a massive drop by Secret Service. They weren't fulfilling their obligations remotely. So that pulls into question the Secret Service. It pulls into question the FBI. It also calls into question Homeland, because of the obstacles they've been putting in the way for Congress to get at the Secret Service. They had to subpoena Kim Cheadle in the end. And I do believe someone's raised an impeachment. They're raising an impeachment to get her phone, to get other things. But really, it shouldn't have to come to that. That this is what the representatives of the people of the US are having to do in order to get accountability for an attempted assassination of a former president, but also the Republican candidate for 2024. So one incident is having a knock-on effect in revealing information from other groups, from the deep state. We now know what the deep state is, and we need to untangle the lot. And the way you do that is through exposure. So every opportunity has been taken from this assassination to expose the elements of the deep state who weren't playing ball, or are not playing ball now, or had other intentions. So more will come out on the back of that assassination attempt as well. And they're now linked up last night that the shooter, the alleged shooter, also was having links, regular links with somebody working in an FBI building. So again, people are starting to put bits together, and this is starting to unveil and reveal and expose where the problems are. We then had this big cyber situation with CrowdStrike. Now, CrowdStrike, as people are now picking up, was very much in the conversation Trump had with Zelensky many years back when he got pulverized by the deep state for doing so. And he was talking about CrowdStrike, and people are now starting to realize that CrowdStrike's been up to some no good in the background. In terms of the DNC, that takes us back to Clinton. It takes us back to Seth Rich, and the connections can be made there. And if you don't know who Seth Rich was, very brief overview. He's a gentleman who was sadly murdered, and he'd been working for the DNC. And he'd got hold of information that was not great for Clinton and other members of the war machine. And this is where WikiLeaks got involved. Seth Rich was murdered, if rumors to be believed, and I think there is evidence out there to support it. Clinton crew were behind that, making that happen. Certainly the deep state were. So that will lead to other things as well. So what we've got to look at is not just the incident as it happens and taking that on the surface of it, i.e. great in terms of people realizing how important cash is. Great in realizing that we cannot rely fully on the digital world to support what we need moving forward. It cannot be trusted. It is not secure enough. It is not right for what we want to see happen. And very interesting that they started pushing digital IDs, or they're going to call it something else, but digital IDs this morning from the UK government. That they're starting to realize now, if they want to get their plans in place, they've got to move quickly. Great, let them carry on, because when people rush, as I said last time, they make mistakes. Apply pressure, apply pressure, apply pressure. Push back online. Let them know what you think. Message your local MP. Shout about it. Let them know that's the chances you've got of making me do this. So that CrowdStrike thing, it will permeate out. It'll have a ripple effect. There'll be other things that come off the back of it. And it will highlight who the players are. Exposure, exposure. Remember, please, this is what this is all about. This period in history is about exposure. And we're going to see things unraveling at a rate of knots now. And if you guys don't understand what's going on, and I don't mean that in a condescending manner, but not many people are as weird as me in terms of having kept my finger on the pulse of what's going on over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years over in the US. So if you've got any questions, shout. I'm happy to either just tell you the answer or try and find the answer if I don't know. Then over the last 24, 48 hours, the Biden story has been fascinating, let's say, absolutely fascinating. So story so far, I think everybody is probably up to speed with it. Laura Loomer put out a report a couple of weeks back that there'd been an incident, a medical incident on board at Air Force One, and she was poo-pooed for it. But based on stories that we're starting to see come out of the US, Biden does have some severe medical health issues, so we're being told by some sources. Always remember, there's multiple sources, multiple reasons behind it, multiple agendas at play. Use your gut instinct. Like I said before, if your head, your heart, and your gut aren't aligning on something, wait. Just wait. You don't have to have an opinion on things at any given time. But the Biden thing's fascinating. So what we saw happen was effectively a coup, based on, again, information that is out there and weighing it up. Personally, I think that there's been some internal wranglings. I think most wanted Biden out of the picture. He was a vulnerability, a liability, and let's face it, Biden wasn't looking good health-wise. We know there's potential dementia and Alzheimer's. Is it real? Is it acting? Well, I know what I think. When you think that the Biden that we are seeing now happens to have his tattoo removed, happens to be writing with a different hand than he did for the previous 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Fascinating. But I'll let you decide how you feel about that. Story rolling out. Let's remember what I said last time. That's a fake Joe Biden. Who's Jill? Who's Hunter? Lots of questions to answer. So there was a coup. So in the background, you had what I see in front of me is that Obama wanted to go one way. He's not a fan of Biden anyway, and he's certainly not a fan of Kamala Harris. Allegedly, Clinton wanted to back Biden and Kamala Harris initially, and publicly she's showing support for Kamala. What I personally think is happening is the deep state are in a little bit of panic, a little bit of free fall in the background. So they're throwing their weight behind Kamala Harris for now, but I think they know they're not stupid people. They might be evil, but they're not stupid. That she is laughable. Put her in front of the likes of Putin. He will literally chew her up and spit her out within a matter of minutes. She will gain no respect from world leaders. She'll gain no respect from the people as soon as she starts talking a lot more. In any debate she's put in front of, she'll be ripped wide open. Tulsi, a previous candidate, went up against her and ripped her apart in a matter of minutes. Kamala Harris has never won any vote or anything else. She's achieved nothing in the last few years. She's allegedly the border czar. You know, that was her role, to take care of the border. She talked about the border once. She talked about abortion a lot, but she talked about the border once. People know, they know, but the Dems are desperate. Dem followers are desperate. So they're going to throw all the weight behind Kamala. But the guys at the top, you know, the deep state guys, they know she's fundamentally useless. There is nothing of substance to the woman. She's I mean, I think that I could debate her and win. Genuinely, and I'm not being egotistical. I genuinely think she's that stupid. We know that the likelihood is she has slept her way to the top, and I'm afraid that isn't somebody. And the deep state know that. They're not stupid. They know that. So unless she's going to go around with an earpiece like Biden and have Obama, whoever sat behind in the shadows, reeling out to her what she should say, and I can't imagine them wanting to do that for the next 4 years, quite honestly. So there's a few options in front of us of the way this could go. Things go ahead as they should. Also, that's another thing as well. There's a question mark over whether Kamala Harris is actually liable, whether she's allowed to become president to do with her birth, where her parents come from, when they were US citizens, when she was born, all this stuff. So it's a little bit complex going on in the background. So I think that she'll be potentially pushed aside. She's being used right now as a cover screen whilst they're working out what they're doing in the background. So it looks all positive. Everything's fancy. We're completely in control. It's all good. No problems whatsoever. I think they'd be more inclined to want Big Mike or Hillary to come into play and be the Democratic candidate. It's another thing as well. What they're doing is sowing seeds, because the Democratic followers, the voters, they've just watched themselves have absolutely no influence over who the Democratic candidate is. Now, a lot of them are going, yay, Kamala, yeah, brilliant, fantastic, publicly. But they, unless they're really stupid, they must be thinking, wow, we sidestepped a bit of democracy there, guys. We didn't even get a say in who the candidate was. And when you think back to the UK position, when Rishi came into play, I mean, how many prime ministers from the Tory cabinet, Tory party, came into play, yet weren't elected by the people? Too many for my liking. So we've watched this coup. It is a coup, effectively take place, because Biden wasn't really involved in that decision process, I don't believe. I really don't. Rumor suggests that Jill and Hunter were storming around the White House for 2 hours, having a major strop, screaming and shouting at people. Again, rumor, who knows? But she certainly was not happy about the initial conversations about Joe stepping down. We could see that just in her demeanor and how she was communicating. So we don't even know if Biden's alive. We don't know if he's dead. We don't know what state he's in. So he's just been flipping pushed to the side. No one really gives a shit about Biden anymore. So much for the caring Democrats. It's actually the Republican side of things that are more interested in what's going on. Then you've got Kamala being pushed into the limelight by the powers that be. I think she's just a huge distraction to the fact that they're having a shit show in the background, and I don't think she'll be the long-term candidate. But there is another spin on all of this. I have not seen exposing information drop this quickly ever. So things are moving at quite a rate of knots. And what we're starting to do is, if you see it, what's being exposed and has been being exposed, it's more and more about those in the background who have had treasonous behaviors. So if you think back, 4 or 5 years ago, people thought the Cheneys were good people. People thought the Obamas were good people. People thought the Clintons were good people. People thought other elements of the deep state were good people. And what's been exposed over the last 4 or 5 years is that these guys are very questionable. There's a huge amount of a question mark over them. And those numbers have just grown and grown and grown and grown, particularly in the US. It is just ginormous, the people that are pushing back now in terms of the numbers against the deep state. And they understand who the deep state players are now. So much more, certainly the surface level stuff. So if we keep exposing, or they keep exposing the good guys at the rate that they are going, we may not even have an election in November, because at some point it becomes obvious that treason's been committed. And at some point, someone has to stand up and say enough. Now, ordinarily, I'd be looking towards the Speaker of the House, which is a guy called Mike Johnson. And I always used to like watching Mike Johnson way back before he was a speaker in the House, because he was always a very straight talker. He was always very fair, very balanced, but he could be a little bit cutthroat when he needed to be. We've seen him come in and play a role in the House that hasn't enamored and excited Republican voters, Republican supporters. But I'd say hold the line on that one. Try not to make too big a judgment just yet, because everyone's playing a role. But will he step up as Speaker of the House and do the right thing, i.e. take control of the shit show, which he's within his rights to do, and certainly get SCOTUS involved in this, get the Supreme Court involved with this? Will he turn out to be a character who is a bad player, in which case then you might see the Conservative movement look to bring in a new speaker? Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Will it be that if treason is proven and a coup has taken place, will the military then be within their rights to step in and say, hang on a minute, this is absolutely unconstitutional. It's now our role to step in and take control of the situation. And if they do that, at that point, then everything starts unraveling. Now, technically speaking, they could come in and do that tomorrow. Well, certainly within a few days, they could come in and do that. Will they? I don't know. I don't know that enough people are awake yet, whether that would have too much of a kickback. You've got to have the majority on side. You have to have the majority on side. And I would imagine that is the state of play in the US, that the majority are, but I don't know well enough to predict that. But we're seeing all of this happen, and it is purely about exposure. So I don't want anyone panicking and worrying. Do we have to play a part? Yes. Is it likely to get rougher for a while? Yes. Could be shorter than I'd initially expected if they carry on at the rate they're going, but technically that could be the state of play. So people say to me, why do you keep looking to the US? Why do you keep looking? Because the US is where the big bombs are going to go off, unless it will come from the US. Something I want to tag in here in terms of the UK, though, that's interesting is we're suddenly seeing a ramp up in case of conspiracy theorist topics coming to the fore via the BBC and other mainstream media. And this week already, we've seen about the digital ID and we've seen about geoengineering. And both of those have been at the fore of mainstream conversation, which is really interesting. This is an unveiling, guys. This is the gentle drip, 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 which is becoming much closer to becoming more of a flood of information that will open people's eyes to look in things in a different way. A lot of these guys have never even had this topic on their radars. Never, never, ever have had this topic on their radars. So they don't know anything about it. And they're about to. They're about to start seeing it happen. So I would suggest hold the line, don't panic, don't get stressed. Start looking at the deeper meaning of stuff as it comes out and the ripple effect that will have in terms of exposure. And I know I keep going back to that word, but that's because it's key at the moment. Excuse me. Now, Biden might be dead. He might be alive. He might not. If he's dead, what did he die of? How did that happen? Did the COVID jabs play a part, or any of the COVID drugs that they just gave him 10 doses of quite quickly? Is that what that's supposed to be about? Is he going to live through and then start causing trouble within the deep state? Because who's to say that guy hasn't been walking around with a mic for months? Who's to say that guy isn't there to do the exposing? The point being, we don't know. But I would suggest it's actually a really exciting time to be alive, because we're watching this happen in real time. We're effectively watching a coup of the US government take place. That's actually what it could be called. The American people don't currently know whether their president is alive or dead. Massive security issue. Massive security issue. I'd love to see what Jean. So last night there was no White House press conference. I want to see if there is one tonight. And if there is, what the heck are they going to say? They might keep putting it off. That's a sure sign as well. There's panic when they don't hold a press conference, press update. Be interesting to see how that rolls out. I'll be keeping a very close eye on that. But yeah, much is going on at the moment, and you've got to look at it from a point of view of exposure, not the darkness, not the or the we don't know what's happening. Oh my gosh, it's so bad. There are too many things lining up beautifully and dropping beautifully hand in hand at the moment for me to think that this is a problem. I don't think it is a problem. I think everything's hunky-dory, actually. I focused in on this stuff rather than the UK because this is where the stuff is happening. But if for a minute the UK government and establishment don't think that what falls out over there will not impact the UK in terms of exposure, they're very much mistaken. Won't go into detail. Another thing, I was speaking to someone this morning. I've been keeping an eye on these little court cases taking place to do with the 2020 election. People think it's all just quiet, nothing's happening. No, things have been going on in the background. And I think that that will be exposed before the 2024 elections, which would be another reason that those elections don't go ahead. I'm not saying they won't. I'm saying there are many possibilities of things that can drop beforehand, which will overturn what happened in 2020. Don't know what the protocol is, whether then Trump is just the duly elected president, whether you do have to have another another election. I don't know what the state of play is, but that's also another thing. They're having little win after little win after little win in terms of revealing the truth about the 2020. That could come into play. Any of these things could suddenly turn everything around in an instant. So, for example, if they come in and the military step in and say, hang on a minute, we've just been sent evidence about the 2020 election, we can see absolutely that it was stolen. And currently there's an illegitimate administration in control. We will be removing them immediately. What then happens in terms of the normie perception? All of a sudden, these guys they've had on a pedestal, don't matter where you are in the world, the left is the left, the right is the right. There seems to be a general difference in terms of opinion. So the guys on the left, let's call it, I don't really like the division of the terminology, but for just explaining it now, everyone will understand that. So the guys on the left, if they suddenly see the 2020 election was stolen, all of these countries were involved, here's the evidence. All of these organizations were involved, here's the evidence. All of these individual people that they've looked up to were involved, here's the evidence. Their minds are going to blow wide open, and all of a sudden they're going to realize they don't know shit. And don't forget, there is still work going on in the background about COVID to do with Fauci. Congress haven't stopped that yet. Ron Paul, he's got to be in his bonnet. He ain't letting it go. I see a convergence. What I predict happening could well be wrong, but what I predict happening over the next coming days, weeks, and months, because that's where we're at now, days, weeks, and months coming up, there'll be a convergence of truth coming out to the point where the mainstream media cannot spin it. They do not have the time or the ability to push it all back at the same time. There'll be a convergence of things drop. Normies' minds are going to go, and that's where they're going to need us. Remember, they're not the enemy. They're going to need us. There's going to be some that stick their effing heels in, and they're going to be arrogant and egotistical and all the rest of it. Try and find patience. Try and look into your heart to remember that they've been brainwashed and they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, even though they're utterly wrong. Don't expect apologies either. But the attack happened on all of us. All these attacks have happened on all of us. And we have to remember that however difficult it is sometimes, and I absolutely get it, we've got to find our patience, we've got to find our tolerance, we've got to find our kindness. Now is a time for that. So anything can happen. I think that's the point here. Anything can happen, but don't get too caught up in it emotionally. Try and stay neutral emotionally, because this is about exposure. This is about watching it all come out. Whether Joe's dead or alive, there'll be a ripple effect. Whether Kamala steps in or not, will be a ripple effect. Whether they pull in Big Mike or Hillary, there will be a ripple effect. This is what we're seeing come out in front of us. The Crowdstrike thing, do we think that's the last one? Probably not. I haven't even got everything fully back online from what I can gather, but that just showed how vulnerable these systems are and how important cash is, as well as the players in the game and how this links up to Ukraine and the DNC and what all this looks like in reality. Now, the people in the UK aren't going to really grasp onto this stuff super quickly because it's predominantly US stuff, but they will. And the story will be told and it will have a ripple effect. People don't understand how our security services were involved in what happened in the 2020 election. They will. They will. And we will disseminate those elements of the deep state or establishment from the UK. But as we're all learning, you cannot tell people, you have to show them. So we're watching it all roll out now. This is what's happening. This is what's taking place in front of me. I am not remotely shocked by anything I'm seeing. Nothing. Not one thing. Not one thing. In fact, it's beautiful to watch. I'm loving it. It's like the best TV show ever. The only downside is the people that are suffering and dying across the world. But then that's been going on for decades, I'm afraid. But that's the reality. We need to bring all that to an end. Evil needs to be caught, contained, and dealt with. Not for me to decide what that looks like. That's down to judge, jury, and potentially executioner. But none of that is for me to decide. However, this is what's happening. We're going to come to this convergence, and all these people are going to suddenly go, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. I've got nowhere to run. And we'll potentially see lots of suicides. We'll potentially see people trying to make a run for it, thinking they might have a chance. I don't think for a minute that's going to happen. Everything happens for a reason. Everything's happened very quickly. Buckle up. It's going to probably get rough for a while. Things are going to feel difficult. I say this every time because I don't want anybody to suddenly be shocked if they're going, I'm completely lost. I don't know what's going on. What's happening? This is dangerous. This feels really scary. Take a breath. It's all about exposure. And I'm not saying it'll all be easy, but we have to go through this. Because like I said in the last video, if you don't wake the majority up, you try and function in society with half the people or more pushing back against you. It doesn't work that way. Societies don't work that way. So we are far better off overall to expose everyone to the truth, to open their eyes to reality, and to help work together to guide forward into a much more golden age where everything can be so much more pleasant. So I might be back soon. I am still doing a big Zoom. I am also looking for full-time work, but this is what I really want to do is do the daily podcasts and keep people up to date with what's happening, start letting them know as soon as action starts happening in the UK, letting you know what's going on, where it's going on with, who's involved, how can we push back, what does that look like, how do we conduct ourselves, all of that stuff. So I'll put the link below to my Just Giving. If you want to help me out so I can carry on doing this, please do. Don't feel obliged. To anyone out there says, oh, she's grifting. No, I'm a single parent. I've got to pay bills. All right. I've been putting myself into the movement and struggling financially for the last few years willingly. No one made me do that. That was personal choice to do the work I've done. But if you are able to help out with the funding, please do, because the longer I can do this, the better, I think, particularly at the moment with everything that's going off. I don't know many people in the UK who's kept up to date with the American political system as well as I have. There's obviously people out there, but there's not that many. And I'm more than happy to share my knowledge with other people. Go have a fantastic day. I might well be even back before the end of the week at this rate. And I've still got the big podcast in mind, but have a good time. Don't stress about it. Any questions, drop them below and I can include them in the next podcast. And yeah, make sure you got some popcorn in because things are about to get really, really interesting. Good luck. God bless. Speak soon.